Hey guys, quick video for our how to do stuff in Japan playlist and our mini series on raising children in Japan. So we sort of got up to the point last time where kid was born. Hello kid, welcome to the world. And we're sort of going to overlap a few things because what's going to happen with these videos is there's so much to remember, and obviously we can't cover everything, but things keep coming back. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. One thing I forgot from the birth, almost everybody here keeps the umbilical cord. So after the baby's born, they tend to cut and keep the umbilical cord, usually in some sort of special little box, especially for it. So that's a really big thing. Everybody seems to do it, and they'll take photos of the umbilical cord and put it on Facebook and things like that. So amongst all the babies just being born photos, there'll be a photo of the umbilical cord. And here's the umbilical cord. Or if you're really lucky, they'll actually give it to you, show it to you. Here it is. Oh, look at this. And you open the box up and there's the umbilical cord in there. So yeah, there it is. What else? Oh yeah, so a couple of months after the baby's born, usually what you do, not everybody, and with the, not religious, but with the traditional sort of Shinto or Buddhist type stuff, it depends on the family. Some people here are into doing the cultural Shinto things or the Buddhist things, and some aren't. You would have seen on our interview playlist, most Japanese people, if you say to them, are you religious? Most Japanese people say no, but a lot of Japanese people do the Shinto and Buddhist thing more of a cultural thing than as a religious thing. So there's all sorts of combinations how people feel about these things. Some people are sort of really religious about it, some people are not, some people it's just cultural, so it depends on the family. So, and again, it depends on how much input your Japanese side of your family have on your life. So in our case, sometimes people go to take the baby to a Shinto shrine, and the guy there does a ceremony thing, sort of a Shinto ceremony thing, and it's supposed to bring good luck and good spirits and keep away bad spirits and stuff to the baby, and help it on its way into life. And the Buddhist temples have a similar thing. So sometimes people go to one or the other. In our case, we actually went to both. So the father-in-law just is right into this. He does all the New Year ceremony things and the Obon ceremony things, and priests actually come to the house and do the shrine. And this is quite common too in Japan. Quite often people pay the Shinto priest guy or the Buddhist priest guy to come to their house and do a ceremony. So if they've got they might have a kamidana in their house, and the Shinto priest will come and do a ceremony there, or they might have a butsudan and the Buddhist priest will come and do a ceremony there. So same thing, it depends on the family, if the family are into that sort of thing. So in our case, the father-in-law is into it, and we did both. We went to a Shinto shrine, and you actually pay some money, and then you go and sit there, and usually they do some other kids at the same time. They'll have sort of a day, Sunday morning or Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon or something, and you go and sit there, and everyone sits in seizo, and you hold the baby, and everybody's dressed formally. So that might be you might be wearing kimono, or you might be wearing an hakama, or you might be wearing just a suit or something like that, but usually it's a fairly formal thing. Sort of like what Christians have a christening. It's the meaning's not the same. Well, it's sort of, I don't know, maybe it is, but it's sort of similar sort of thing, similar sort of atmosphere, So you're sitting there in the Shinto shrine or the Buddhist temple, and they do the thing. So in our case, we did both, so we've experienced both of them. So there's that. So yeah, what do we want to talk about today? The keeping the umbilical cord, yeah, the Shinto shrine, the Buddhist thing. With that thing, there's lots of people here see it in different ways. So no matter what your own personal thinking is about religion, the way to possibly a useful way to see these sort of ceremonies is as a cultural thing. Whether you're religious or not religious, or whether you're another religion, or whatever your thinking is about these things, it's better not to fight it we've made videos on the Shrine and Temple playlist before about these sorts of things, and sometimes people really resist and say, no, I wouldn't be doing that pagan stuff, or I wouldn't be, you know, and yeah, well, of course, everyone's got a right to choose what they get involved with and what they don't, but probably, you know, the easiest way to see it is just it's a cultural thing that people do, and the ceremonies are the same. Usually with most of those ceremonies, you don't have to actually do much yourself, you just sort of sit there. So you just sort of sit there in Seiza on your knees, you know, usually. If you can't sit in Seiza, it's okay, but usually everybody's sitting in Seiza on their knees, and, you know, someone holds a baby, and the guy does the thing for maybe, 15-20 minute ceremony, you know, bomb bomb. Sort of cool. I mean, usually the shrines and the temples, we've showed you these shrines and temples before, and usually they are really cool. Beautiful old buildings and great atmosphere, and the smell of incense in the air, and, you know, that's the sort of the way to approach it, is just as a cultural thing, you know, and just enjoy it for the cultural event that it is. Don't, you know, if that's the most comfortable way for you to approach it, there's that. So there's that, and you don't have to do any of that, of course, and then some families do, some families don't, so, you know, it'll depend on your family whether or not they want to do that or not, and your partner, your Japanese partner, whether they're into it or not. So there's that thing. And then the other thing that was just sort of trying to kick around what to talk about next, because there's so many topics to cover. Another one is the fact that everything's so clean and sterile, and depending on what sort of background you've had yourself, what country, sort of society or culture you've come from, and how you were raised, and what you're used to. As you already know, Japanese people are really careful about germs and about cleanliness, and, you know, the whole thing with the taking the shoes off and the sterilising the hands. You know, we've showed you a million examples of this, and really, really full on with the cleanliness thing. And when a baby comes into the picture, it just goes to a whole new level, and everything's sterilised, and really, what some people might feel is really over the top. And as a parent, it can drive you a little bit crazy, and it tends to stay. It's like that. It's not just when they're real newborns either. They tend to continue like that. Everything's always super clean, and, you know, kids going outside with no shoes on and playing in the mud is just not on. Although, having said that, there are some kindergartens who actually do have that sort of play, where what they'll do is they'll let the kids take their shoes off and go outside and play in mud or play in sand or something and get really dirty, and then they have an outside shower, and they'll actually give the kids a shower. All the kids line up naked. Here's a thing for you. All the kids will line up naked, usually just up to kindergarten level, and they'll all line up naked and have a shower outside. And then after their shower, they put their clothes and their shoes and their socks on, and then they go over to the door of the genkan and they take their shoes off and put their inside shoes on, and then they go back to being sterile again. So there are some examples like that. There are some kindergartens that do that, more so out in the countryside here than in the city. It's not likely to happen in the city too much. So, and that's sort of like a, you know, that's like a thing in summer, maybe a couple of, you know, one afternoon a week or something. So it's pretty rare. So most kids here have never walked outside without shoes on, and even at the beach, you know, they'll wear sort of beach sandals, and they'll walk right down to the water, and quite often in the water. Quite often adults too here, Japanese people, adults and children, will wear rubber shoes, slip-on shoes, not Crocs, a little bit different to Crocs, but special shoes to wear in the water, so that they don't take their shoes off. They get out of the car and they slip these rubber shoes on, and that's it. They wear them on the sand, they wear them in the ocean, they walk around. Or if you go to the river, quite often when people go to the river, they have these little river, sort of like a slipper, rubber slipper sort of thing, waterproof slipper, and they wear these slippers in the river. So there are a lot of Japanese kids who've never really played outside without shoes on, and as a result, of course, have really delicate feet. But this sterile thing, you know, because there's a lot of cultures, including, interestingly, there was a really interesting article written by a doctor at Tokyo University, a professor at Tokyo University, who did a study on allergies and things like that, because we've talked about on the healthcare playlist, there's a high incidence of allergies and hay fever in Japan, really, really high. Lots of people here have hay fever, and there was a doctor at Tokyo University who did some studies on this, and his findings, one of his findings was that he thinks that because Japanese people are raised from when they're born in really super sterile environments, that has weakened their immune systems. Surprise, surprise. And that means that, as they get older, they get all sorts at all ages, they have hay fever and they have weak immune systems. So, that was his finding. But as with all things here, it doesn't really make much difference, because it's a really strong thing here about the cleanliness, and you'll find yourself trying to get any sort of flexibility on the cleanliness thing here is really hard, because it's really deep rooted. If you could sort of imagine, I don't know, in your own culture, what you consider to be clean, and someone comes along and does something that you consider to be way unclean, walk around with their finger up their nose or something like that, and tries to convince you that that's okay to do that, obviously you're not going to accept it, are you? And it's a little bit like that, trying to convince people here, as a parent who's come from a different background, you might want to try and convince your partner that it's good to let the kid get dirty sometimes, because a lot of us believe that, don't we? A lot of people from other countries and other cultures believe that letting a small child, not necessarily a newborn, but a child of 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or a year old, letting them get really dirty sometimes and put dirt in their mouths and do all that sort of stuff is actually good for them, because a lot of us believe, like the professor at Tokyo University, a lot of us believe that strengthens their immune systems, right? So for us that seems like a no-brainer, that seems like an obvious thing. But trying to convince the other parent about that is really tricky. So, you can talk about that with the other partner, and you can sort of try and encourage it. Go on, let them go, let them play. But you'll find the partner, they'll be picking the kid up and taking them off, carrying them into the house and taking him into the shower and washing them off, and all paranoid about it, because it's just a thing. It's just a thing that everything's always sterile here. Everything's always sterile and clean, and it's all gloves and alcohol wipes and over the top. So that is a big one. That is a really big one, and you've got to live with that one every day, because it's constant. It's never ending. It's never ending, that one, because kids are classics for putting their hands in dirty things, aren't they? In a pot plant, and they're putting their hand in their mouth, or wanting just to play outside, and get dirty or whatever. So that is a tricky one. That's a really tricky one. And again, with all these, you sort of, obviously if you can talk about it with your partner and try and talk about it and try and give examples or show things, but again, it's really tricky, because it's like that finger up your nose thing. If you've believed all your life that people putting their finger up their nose is disgusting, and suddenly someone comes along and tells you, no, it's not, it's quite normal and quite okay to do it, it's going to be hard to accept it, isn't it? It's a bit like that sort of thing. So it is really hard for the partners to be flexible on this. So all you can do is talk about it, try and reach some compromises, and say, okay, look, let him get really dirty, and then I'll take him inside and give him a wash or something, and maybe reach some compromises if you can. With all these relationships, with the being married to a Japanese person videos, and with these videos, it's always the same thing. Communication obviously is important if you can, and sort of reach some sort of compromise. But as a couple of people have noted, usually with these things, it usually ends up with us having to compromise, a little bit more, particularly if you live in Japan. See, it's easier if you're living in your own country and the kids are all running feral outside with no shoes on, getting dirty, and your kid wants to do it too. It's a little bit easier because it's normal, and Japanese people do tend to go with what everybody's doing. that's sort of a natural reaction for Japanese people. So if all the other kids are running around with no shoes on, getting covered in dirt and mud, then it's easier to sort of get your kid into doing it too. Whereas if you're in Japan and all the other kids are all walking around with their shoes on and they're all sterile and clean and stuff, and then there's pressure in all directions then too. If all the kids have got their beach slippers on or whatever and everyone's being all sort of clean and your kid's got no shoes on and is sort of going feral, then they're not going to get pressure from the other parent, but they're going to get sort of pressure from the other kids and the other parents, and everybody's going to be tilting their heads and sucking through their teeth and wild. Look at the wild kid, so, and then that freaks the other parent out then, because doing anything in Japan that's different from what everyone else does is a freak out, oh, no one else is doing that, so yes. Anyway, heads up, with most of these how-to videos, some of them are actually how-to, sort of suggestions on what to do, whereas some of these things are just observations and just a heads up. Just a heads up, because sort of knowing that these things exist before you encounter them can be useful. Sometimes these things, if the first time you encounter this thing is in real life and it's really happening to you, it can be hard to deal with. Where you've got a kid and the kid's 3 months old and crawling on the floor and puts its finger in the mouth and the other parent loses its mind or something. But, if you've never heard about this stuff, you get some super overreaction, what seems like an overreaction. If you've never heard about this stuff, it can be hard to understand. Whereas at least the idea of these videos is, at least if you've heard about it already, with all these how-to videos, if you've heard about these things already and then you experience them, it might make it a little bit easier to understand what's happening and to deal with what's happening and to react in some sort of reasonable and calm way, because that's all you can do. And with a lot of these things, we've got to remember, as we've mentioned before, we've got to remember that this is very, very normal to everybody here. So even though some of the reactions that you get and some of the behaviour you get with all the keeping everything sterile can seem over the top, in some countries it would actually, some of these behaviours, if you watch them, could actually be considered to be neurotic and could be considered to be, what's that, the repetitive thing where you're always cleaning. And there's some of the behaviours, when you see them, you think, wow, that could, that's, in some countries, that could be diagnosed, right, as being like, a germ phobia sort of thing. But it's not here. It's just what the normal behaviour that people do, so. Anyway, there it was. Hopefully someone found that useful, or if they haven't found it useful today, maybe someone might find it useful in the future. More videos coming soon.